I am the queen of enjoying every moment, never wanting something good to come to an end, and a late checkout is the embodiment of that. I'm your host, Laura Janela.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Late Checkout. Two things. I, first of all, hope you enjoyed the Kiki session with Evie Gonzalez last week because that was recorded back in November when I visited Jersey. And it was such a highlight and so different to be in studio versus like an actual studio versus like my home little mini studio that I have here. I feel like it put like a little pressure on me to be on instead of just being in the comfort of my own home. And it was so nice to do it with a friend that I feel comfortable with because it eased me into it. I don't know if I'd be able to do it by myself. It's like a whole different atmosphere. But I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed Late Checkout's first monthly newsletter that dropped last week. I feel like there was just so much good information in there, elaborating on all the episodes from January and just giving you guys a place to have the details and the links and the information that you can go back to at any time. Now you have it in your email. You can just search by January recap or late checkout, and it's there. And it just makes me happy to give you guys all those details and informaciones. This week, since I am 37 weeks pregnant, at least when this releases, I'll be 37 weeks. I'm talking to you now from 36 weeks, but I am feeling it. I am feeling time slipping away. I am feeling like the pregnancy stuffy nose. I am just kind of getting a little frantic and overwhelmed by the fact that I only have a few weeks left. Like, if I'm lucky, I hope I'm lucky. I hope I make it to 40 weeks just so I can continue nesting, so we can like officially pick a name because that hasn't happened yet. I feel like there's just so much to do. Lordy, I have been pregnant for 8.5 months, and I really haven't dedicated an episode yet to talk about pregnancy in general. And I wanted to take this week before shit gets crazy, before shit hits the fan, to just talk about pregnancy and wellness. Like, I love to talk about wellness in the pillars of physical, spiritual, and mental. And those pillars you can apply to any area of your life if you want to reflect and think about your wellness barometer in any area on those levels, which for pregnancy, definitely all three apply. And I want to share what I've done to navigate those three pillars because I think I've had a pulse check on them in different ways through both pregnancies, even way before this podcast was ever a thing and before I really like labeled these pillars for myself. I think I was just always organically navigating my life that way. And I think it's important for us women to really shed light on the wellness around pregnancy. I mean, prenatal, during, postpartum, all of it. But today I'm really just going to focus on like a little bit of but mostly during pregnancy. And speaking of postpartum, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing about maternity leave and late checkout. I obviously have some pre-recorded eps that I will be dropping. I don't know what the schedule is going to look like. Definitely a February newsletter will be going out at the end of February, beginning of March. But obviously, depending on when baby boy decides to bring his debut and like enter the world, his world premiere, that'll dictate how much I'm able to essentially get done before I go out. But I will keep you guys updated as much as I can, especially on my Instagram account. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this on, please hit the subscribe button. It would be so helpful for me, but also helpful for you to know when the latest episodes drop and kind of keep tabs on where we're at with everything. And definitely go follow on Instagram if you haven't already. So I was thinking about it, and I feel like a lot of us women, obviously I'm going to speak a lot for myself because I hate speaking for other people, but from my experience with my friends who have gotten pregnant, and when I say a lot of us women, I say this in a positive way because I think we're all so strong and we are all so multifaceted that it's so easy for us to keep going without like stopping and checking in with ourselves. So I feel like one of the first things going into pregnancy, whether you've been planning for pregnancy or you're spontaneously pregnant, is really checking in with yourself on the wellness scale. Mental, physical, and spiritual. I think it's so important to not only ask yourself, how am I feeling in all those ways? What are my current habits? What is my current state? And just answering yourself in the most honest way possible. So you're able to prepare yourself for a pregnancy that is filled with the right resources and the right support system to be able to make this just like an optimal experience for you. Personally, for me, going into my first pregnancy, I was in a severe state of grief, mentally and physically. I had just lost my dad a couple months before that, and I was not my typical mental, spiritual, physical self on any of the scales. I just was completely different from what I was usually doing. I physically was not working out. Since I was in my mid 20s, I've always been really adamant about making sure I'm moving my body throughout the week. And when my dad passed away, I was like, I'm giving myself the space to not be anything I used to be. Like, let me just figure out in my skin who I am without a parent, because it's such a weird transition. Going back, I had every hope and dream to be able to tell my dad that I was pregnant before he passed away. Unfortunately, we were not able to conceive before that. By the time I was getting pregnant with Leandro, like successfully conceiving with him, we had been trying for 10 months at that point. And it's really funny how things work. Not funny, but just the universe has its ways. God has his ways. And as soon my dad passed away in January, February, I had my first positive pregnancy test, but it ended up being a chemical pregnancy. And it was the first sign of like any fertility that I had at all. I was thinking to myself, okay, I just turned 34. I was going to go the full year of trying and then, seek out help through a fertility clinic and whatnot. And I thought it was so interesting that the month after he passed, it was my first somewhat successful cycle of kind of showing any sign of fertility to myself. And I think that chemical pregnancy made me realize, okay, what do I need to do to help myself at all, even if it's just the tiniest bit right now, because I was so out of whack. I was so in the grieving process. I was mourning like crazy. And I knew I wasn't ready to be like going to the gym and getting myself, into this like full blown what Laura used to be mode, because I wasn't the old version of myself anymore. I was figuring out who I was now. So I thought to myself, okay, like how can I physically feel better and nurture my body without forcing myself to do things I just don't physically want to do? So that's when I started thinking about acupuncture. I started thinking about wanting to commit to a regimen with acupuncture if I liked it. I just wanted to try it on for size originally, and then really thought about how I wanted to like apply it. And I had come across a traditional Chinese medicine specialist who to this day is my TCM specialist. I absolutely adore her, Dr. Rachel in Zurich. She is so amazing, so authentic, so well versed, and she has like her full degree in traditional Chinese medicine, studied in the UK and spoke great English. So like it was a match for me. But I was seeking acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine in general because there's like herbology, there's moxibustion, there's cupping, there's just a lot of ways to help any type of stagnation, like emotional stagnation in the body. And I knew I was filled with it. I knew like from head to toe, I was still in a state of PTSD from my dad passing and having taken care of him like the last month of his life. And I wanted to make sure that my body somehow had like the help to just somatically get energy and the trauma and the stress and the hurt and the emotional stress moving through my body. Not necessarily to get rid of it, because I really held on to the fact that I was sad that my dad passed away as a way of him like not being gone. Like there's just, the tears and the grief were somehow comforting, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't blocking anything for my fertility. And then on top of that, I obviously spoke to her about fertility in general. So she started treating me on that level, was to emotionally help me get rid of like blockages and stagnation. And on top of that, to apply any fertility treatments that she could on me. A few months after that, I actually had a miscarriage, like in April. When I had the miscarriage, I was about 6 weeks pregnant or just making 6 weeks pregnant. And I went to her for acupuncture like 2 weeks after the miscarriage. And I felt like the acupuncture, I remember like the sensation of like her hitting like acupressure points that would help stimulate like my endometrium to heal and like feeling it on the inside. I really feel like her helping hand helped my ability to heal and then to the following month be able to conceive with Leon through. So for me, from like an acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, zero regrets. I continued to see her through my entire pregnancy with Leon through. I remember like I was 40 weeks plus 3 days. She even came over to my house to do acupuncture points. And also, she had actually worked in a hospital in the maternity ward as an acupuncture specialist. I don't know if they have this in the States. Here, they have acupuncture specialists in the maternity ward so that when you are in labor, an acupuncturist, if you request it, can come in and just hit those acupressure points around your body to help, enable labor, to enable dilation, all those things. So, which I think is amazing. But having her throughout my pregnancy I felt like it was a nice form of hand-holding for me because it made me feel physically in tune and aligned since I really throughout my pregnancy didn't feel like my entire old self. I was figuring out my new self. I was now a hormonal self. So I was just like in transition in so many different facets. Um, but also, I mean, that's like a physical part of my wellness. From a mental and spiritual part, I guess you could also say, is that I knew I needed to process a lot of the trauma that I had just been through. I, at the time, was seeing a therapist who was really more of like a compassionate therapist. Like, I wanted something more aggressive. I was like, I need somebody who is going to like process trauma with me. Like, that's when I first came across EMDR. I was like, okay, I want to find a therapist who is certified in EMDR. And I came across who my now therapist is, and I ended up switching over to her, which is also like so awkward to break up with a therapist to begin with. But I was very grateful to my old therapist, and I told her like why I was seeking a new one and that I needed, after my dad passing, because she had helped so much while my dad was alive and essentially mourning his loss pre him passing because he was sick. And then I felt like this new therapist was like here to like take the baton and help me through like after the fact. So I also started seeing a therapist and nourishing my mental state, which that shit takes time. It takes so much time, but I needed somebody also outside of just my husband because I adore him to death and we both were in the trenches together. But I also know he had his own form of trauma from that time and experience. And also, he lost my dad too. Him and my dad were close. So it was just tough on the house, and I knew I needed somebody outside of it to just help me, give me resources, help me process. If there was anything I could bring home to help my husband with in reflecting and thinking, I wanted to do that. It was just a very chaotic pregnancy in terms of my wellness pillars, and I was doing everything I possibly could without forcing myself to be something I didn't feel like was right. I was just seeking new resources. I was seeking and tapping into other places and professionals around me that could also just give me the support during my first pregnancy, period. This is the first time I'm experiencing like full on pregnancy hormones. I was post chemical pregnancy, post miscarriage. I was so nervous this pregnancy because I was nervous to lose the baby. I was nervous to bend over too fast or like run across the street too quickly. Like I mean, for those of you who've been pregnant before, I'm sure you feel that difference between the first and second pregnancy and like your mental state of how nervous you are the first time, and the second time you feel a little bit more confident. But you have to be able to know and realize just our bodies are going at full max capacity, enduring so many shifts and hormonal surges, and our blood is pumping like 50% more blood through our body. Like, we are like not human during these 9 months. Like, we are essentially just like aliens creating and forming another little alien, and it is an insane amount of science and biology going on in our bodies that, yes, you can physically see it because your stomach is growing, but no one can actually really see it, like knowing. Like, as women, I think we do a phenomenal job of acting put together as much as possible because we're so used to like hormonal fluctuations every week of every month, like always. But this is next level. And if we don't remind ourselves, like, this is something so much bigger than us and so much more than just like a PMS and a period for the month, and like just giving ourselves that permission to not be the expert in this, especially the first time around, and saying, okay, I can endure this. My body is physically built to do this. But if one of my pillars of wellness is off, I need to be able to hold myself responsible to get myself the support and the resources that I need to help me get through one of the biggest and craziest experiences of my life. All right, fast forward to my second pregnancy. Lordy, completely different mental, physical, and spiritual space. Completely different from my first. Going into it, I was extremely active. I had, not only refound myself as a daughter who no longer had her dad, but I also had gone through postpartum, which was a fucking shitstorm for me, and was just feeling, I think, like 3 months before I got pregnant again, it was like I had finally felt like I was in my own body, meaning I felt like I had my body back. I felt like my body was really fully healed. I felt I was in my best physical condition I had been since pre my dad passing away. And I was also just enjoying motherhood. I was really enlightened by motherhood. I loved seeing the milestones that Leandro was hitting. It was just different. I was getting my footing as a mom, getting a footing as an individual. So going in physically, I had my regimens back. I was going to spin class. I had, weight training classes, going on my long walks with my dog again. I had myself physically back, and going into this pregnancy, way different scale. I didn't have to worry about stagnation in the body. I didn't have to worry about the physical aspect of my particular wellness pillar because I knew I had a grapple on it. I think mentally it was a little bit more challenging for me because I was transitioning careers, and I had just made that decision a month or two before I found out I was pregnant. So I think for me, the biggest challenge was, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to continue feeling like I haven't lost traction in this career zone while having to listen to my body? Because the first trimester, I mean, let's be honest, it's tray fucking tiring and you just feel exhausted. I was so nauseous this pregnancy. It was, like, I had to find that balance. I had to know that I felt great. I had so much motivation. I had so much inspiration, and I just wanted to get it out there, but I also needed to keep a pulse check on like how I was physically feeling at the same time, and giving myself grace and allowing myself to be tired and allowing myself the naps, because you do have to listen to your body throughout pregnancy. You should absolutely not be pushing yourself to your full capacity. And girls, mommies, all of us, with or without children, we are always pushing ourselves at our max capacity because we are so fucking amazing at multitasking. We are amazing at making sure we have everything done. And that means like the to-do list is never ending in our head. It's a fucking scroll, and we are just checking off, checking off, checking off. Like, a guy could never. If my husband had 1 minute in my head about the what I'm on top of mentally, he'd be like, I want out. Like, I'm out of here. there. I can't. Not that he's not helpful and amazing himself and he does his own stuff, but us women, so much going on. We do not give ourselves grace. So I feel like having grace going into a pregnancy in itself is a nice way to apply a spiritual factor of wellness is and you're going to have to constantly remind yourself of that because you will always be pushing yourself to your max without even meaning to. You just want to get stuff done, and I'm the same way, and it's something I really had to have a bigger pulse check on this pregnancy versus last, because last I was giving myself all the grace in the world. I didn't have a toddler running around. I had my cushy little job. I wanted to mourn and grieve and just be slower. And it was just different. This time I had to really spiritually, mentally, physically check in constantly to make sure I wasn't pushing myself too hard. And there were days I definitely were. And I think that showed up throughout this pregnancy when I had a couple hiccups, like getting sick a million times. I know my toddler got me sick, but I feel like it was also God or the universe's way of being like, slow down. Like, you don't need to be doing all of this. Or my round ligament pain, which I'll get into later. But forcing grace on yourself during pregnancy is a check-in that's mandatory. Absolutely. And not only do we have these like natural wellness pillars that we should be checking in on, or I feel like is a great way to have like a pulse check on how you can actually navigate pregnancy yourself, but we also have the beautiful surges of hormones and the crazy that we feel and the symptoms. And it's just so much going on at once. It's honestly chaotic that we endure it and that there are women who endure it like multiple times as if it's just like super fucking normal. It's not. This shit is not for the weak. It is not. It's beautiful that we are able, capable, and built for this, but it is something that I am still appalled with sometimes. And just I don't have the words for how unnatural of a natural process this is. And no pregnancy is the same. Like none of them are the exact same. I'm having another boy. Both my pregnancies were different. I'm sure the elements of my wellness pillars contribute to that, like how going into pregnancy that I was, but also just like symptomatics. Like, my first pregnancy and this pregnancy, I was tired first trimester, but this pregnancy, I was so much more nauseous to the point where it was like debilitating. I didn't want to get off the couch certain days. Swore up and down based on like the myths about having a girl and how a girl makes you super nauseous. I swore I was having a girl because of how nauseous I felt the first try. During my first pregnancy, I had like smell aversions. I couldn't smell like home cooked meals, even though that's all we cook in the house is home cooked meals. So that was really tough because I couldn't stomach smelling like steamed broccoli, cooked chicken. It was all the stuff that I eat essentially like on a daily basis. The first trimester, I was like, get it the F out of my house. I don't want it. This pregnancy, I didn't really have that many aversions like that. It was just really the nausea and then it went away. I had more like physical stopping points, like I mentioned, like the round ligament pain, which was debilitating for like a week. I felt I could only walk hunched over. It was insane. This time I'm experiencing some sciatica pain, which just started this past week. I've never had sciatic pain before. And I know I'm going back and forth here, but in my first pregnancy, I also in the second trimester had COVID. It was my first time catching COVID. And that was a doozy, especially when I was in my first pregnancy, so nervous about losing the baby because of the miscarriages. You're like crazy in the head during pregnancy, okay? Like you are so aware. But it's funny because this pregnancy, I was so much more active. I just felt more confident that the womb really can endure and provide such a safe space for the baby. Like I felt more confident in my body. I felt more confident that also what's meant to be will be. Like there were a lot of elements in my second pregnancy that I have felt just way more safety and I don't know, I guess a part of it is like self-alignment too, and also that I've just been through this before. Like having the experience under your belt, you feel like you can actually do this and you don't need to be going crazy over every single little detail. And I know that panic is justified because our hormone levels are insane, like absolutely crazy. And there's the crying out of nowhere. There's the fucking hormone rage. Like, oof, and you feel validated in your rage. You feel validated in those tears. Like, you are like, no, this is what I'm feeling. And it is valid. All of it's valid because there is no one else who could be enduring the level of crazy scientific biology, chemistry-ness that's going on in your body other than you. And if that's how you have to get through it is some rage or some tears, girls, do not be pitying the people around you. They need to understand that this is a part of the process. So it's okay. And to be clear, I'm like not somebody who is in love with pregnancy. I won't be somebody who is reflecting on pregnancy like, oh, I miss my belly and oh, I miss feeling him kick. Like, I think this experience is absolutely beautiful and crazy and one of a kind and truly absolutely special. I feel an insane privilege to be able to carry both my children, and I'm so happy and grateful for the experience. But I am just not one of those women who are just like, I love pregnancy. This is for me and I want to have a million babies. Like, I'm just not that girl, and there is nothing wrong with that girl. Those women are incredible for embracing pregnancy in that way. For me, this is my last pregnancy. Knock on wood. Like, that's the plan. And I'm trying to be just like more present that this really is like the end of a chapter for me, like reproduction and passing on legacy, like just the whole aspect of it is a chapter in itself. So I don't want to necessarily like rush through it. I want to be present for it. I want to be in the moment for it. But when it's over, I am going to be very happy to have my body back, to just be able to enjoy the little lives that we've created and me just have my body back. Because one of my friends, Chelsea, she said it best, like pregnancy, it's so much rental space being taken up by this little creature inside. Like all the nutrients, all the blood, all the hormones, things just get uncomfortable at a certain point, and you really do crave the ability to just feel physically like yourself again. And I am forever grateful for this experience, but like never again. Never again. And I also think it's important to recognize that about yourself, to know that it's okay to not want to get pregnant at all, or to want to have 12 babies. Like whichever way your pendulum is swinging, like is completely amazing for you. You do not need to compare yourself to the next mom or to the next woman. Like, I really love this era that we're entering with women just owning the fact that no, I don't want to reproduce. I don't want to have a baby. I don't want to be pregnant. Or maybe I do want to have children, but I just want to adopt, or I want surrogacy, or whatever it is. Like, I love the options from that science gives us and the ability that we can give other children who, don't have homes, a safe, loving, and warm home without it having to be at the expense of your own body. Like, I think destigmatizing the fact that we like have an opinion about what we want to do with family building or lack thereof, it's like that's not the whole purpose of life. Like, there's just so much more purpose to us as individuals and as humans outside of family creation. And I definitely want to pin that as something here for me that I am all about, because it's very easy to compare yourself to other moms or other women, on both sides of the spectrums, how you're mothering or how much you want to do outside of motherhood. And you're seeing other women just kill it in their careers and have all this time and taking all these trips. And just make sure that you are doing what it is you truly, authentically, in your highest essence, want to be doing when it comes to children and family creating. And this is why I'm talking about the wellness pillars with pregnancy, because I think this is just a great way to check in with yourself about it and to be honest with yourself. I remember I had a friend here who once asked me when we first started trying to get pregnant why I wanted to be pregnant. And at first I was like a little taken aback, like, what makes you want to have kids? Like, why do you want to be pregnant? And it wasn't in a judgmental way. She was asking because she wanted to reflect on why or why not. I think she was also in her own decisions about whether she wanted to have kids or not. And for me, I personally felt very much on the fence up until I was 33. Like, we were enjoying ourselves without children. We were having the time of our life, and we both, like me and my husband, we both knew we wanted kids, but, like, didn't know when that was gonna happen. Like, what we did know was that we were having a damn good time by ourselves. We both knew when you hit your 30s and you don't have kids, you actually really think about the realities of having kids, like the financial reality, the time commitment, the lack of sleep, like the all of it, right? The realities become really apparent, and it's something that we had to really think through. But for me, and what I told my friend was that when I lost my grandmother in 2020, at the end of 2020, there was something that just clicked. I just knew, like, it's time to start. I think because of the connection I had with my grandmother, and she had such a matriarchal vibe to her. I think losing her, there was something about the circle of life, legacy, that connection, that female connection to another female in my family like that. Like, it just, something inside of me clicked and was like, it's time. Like, yes, I absolutely want kids, and I think it's time to start. But there's a knowing, and I think it's also okay to think one way one day and then something like that happen, and for you to completely change your mind and have you think a different way. Like, just because you've decided on one particular view and stand on whether you want kids or not does not mean you can't change your mind. People evolve, people change. And I was so happy that my friend asked me that question, because I did myself get to reflect about really what was it. And even then, like when we started trying, I was like, wait, am I ready? I don't know. Are we ready? But that's just being human and constantly overthinking shit. I want to end the last few minutes here just being able to present you guys a couple resources that helped me and Brian transition into parenthood, or like prep for parenthood. Pregnancy, especially your first, is such an interesting chapter of transition, because you're pregnant, you're pregnant, you're pregnant, and you're prepping and you're nesting and you're whatever. But the day that baby comes out and you become parents, it's like that label comes, but you don't feel like a parent, even though there's a crying baby and you're breastfeeding or you're not like, even though all this shit is happening, that label hasn't necessarily like settled in yet. So a couple things that we did to just help us prep. Firstly, just have an in-depth conversation with your spouse about your ideologies of parenting, how you want to parent, what you want schedules to potentially look like, what you want to gain out of parenthood. Any type of conversation around, I'll call parenthood management, is so healthy, even if it completely changes once the baby's here. It's just so good to open that door of conversation with your spouse, so there's a platform there, access and ability to approach the topic openly, because we all have to, open that can of worms eventually. So I think prepping for parenthood, that's number one, is just having those in-depth conversations and going back and forth with your spouse. Talk to new parents or talk to parents who have recently had children, and just data gather what they did, what worked for them, what books did they read, what resources had they used to help themselves navigate transitioning into parenthood as well. Obviously, there's so much information out there with like Instagram and YouTube and just endless amount of books and specialists talking about all this stuff, but there's nothing like firsthand experience from your friends or friends of friends, or get connected with people who have recently had kids if you don't have any friends that have kids, because it just helps to hear it like live from the source. There's something that hits a little more. And for us, we even would notice like our friends that had kids before us, like little things that we liked about their parenting styles, and we would note it. And you kind of just come up with like a blend of ideas or resources and approaches that you would like to apply and create your own way of it, because there's no perfect way to do anything, Please do not put that on yourself. But we're human. We like some control. We like to be prepared. And I think that's one of the best ways to do it is to get talking to other parents. We personally had a friend who used the Moms on Call books, which I loved. It's a program created by two pediatric nurses who created just very straightforward ways to intro you into parenthood. Like they had videos of like diaper changing, swaddling. I was the baby child and I did not have like little cousins around. I was not diaper changing growing up. So yes, I watched that video to diaper change. Swaddling, never swaddled a baby before, needed that little like lesson. They also have books that have these schedules to help you navigate anywhere from 2 weeks old to 3 years old. And my husband and I found them to be so helpful in applying a schedule for our baby because being expats and not having family around, we wanted to try our best to help our son get as much sleep as possible. So he was progressing and growing and hitting his milestones and developmentally just like wanting to get him on like such a great track. Obviously, I know schedules don't work for every parent, but if you are interested in schedules, definitely look into Moms on Call. I did enjoy them. I feel like, like their videos are a little bland and like their jokes are like, corny and stuff, but they had really useful information. And honestly, Leandro took really well to the schedules. And I absolutely would recommend those books to anybody. And the last thing I would say about, just prepping for parenthood is getting some information about the fourth trimester, postpartum recovery. Get your resources aligned if you can, guys. This is something I did not spend enough time doing in my first pregnancy, and I'm going to this time around. It's a fucking doozy. Postpartum is a doozy. I personally did not realize how bad my postpartum was until like a year after, to be fully honest and transparent with you. And I know, very hard for your spouse to watch you go through or your parents to watch you go through if they're around and helping. And if you can help yourself with at least having the resources, a listing of support groups or exercises to do, like breathing exercises, any like mental or spiritual things that you can kind of rely on to get yourself into, even if it's once a week to do, in your own nook of the house without the baby, just do it. And that's like a very simple version of that. What I'm really excited to say is that I will be having my friend Evie Gonzalez, who was on last week, back because she is an expert in the maternal mental health field, and just having an entire episode solely on maternal mental health, solely on her giving us all the information and resources and places to go to and people to seek, especially if you're in the States, but even if not in the States, like if you're an English speaker, I know Evie is so happy and open to help anybody. And she is just a fountain of knowledge when it comes to it. So I'm actually recording with her next week, and the episode should probably drop sometime in April. But I cannot wait to get all that information out to you guys, and also for me to learn it for myself. I'm specifically meeting with her hopefully before this baby comes. This baby better not come in the next week, to educate myself as well. So as I'm getting educated, I hope it educates you guys and helps you guys with some resources for postpartum. But yes, looking forward to that. Guys, I'm capping it here. Pregnancy and wellness. I hope this was helpful. I hope, you guys have some resonating feelings, or if there is any takeaways that you liked about this. I am definitely going to be sharing everything I covered in this episode in the newsletter in terms of links, resources, my therapies, TCM, and probably a little bit more as well. I'm sure there's stuff that I didn't think of to cover in this episode, so you'll be able to grab that in Feb's newsletter. Anyway, I will see you guys next week. Have a beautiful day. Ciao, ciao.